the number one thing that's wrong with the VA, in my opinion, are the process of C&P exams.
Mm-hmm.
Examiners only see evidence the VA gives them, right?
Right.
Examiners are not obligated to look at evidence that you bring. They don't have to at
Mm-hmm.
all, right? So now there's that legality play there. And then it's a lot of personality based, right?
Yeah.
And so my C&P exams, which were a few years ago, I can tell you one examiner was just confrontational, right?
Mm.
Very confrontational, didn't really want to hear my symptoms. It was more yes, no. And I'm not a big fan of that at all. But then it goes back to what we said earlier. Because I had evidence,
Right.
it's irrefutable, right?
Right.
Now, if that evidence is not there, all of a sudden that C&P exam becomes the sole source of the evidence. Now you
Yep.
might be in trouble. And so I'm not bashing C&P examiners. Some are really good. Some are. It's a government contract, right? Let's just be real. It's the lowest bidder. I get
Right.
that. And you're not going to find, Johns Hopkins psychiatrist instructor as a C&P examiner. That's not who you're going
Right.
to find. You're going to find psychologist so-and-so trying to pay off medical debt. I get that, but it really goes back to, if you have evidence, you can always lean on that, right? And in the event that you don't have evidence, that C&P examiner becomes the gospel, right?
Right. So I think that you hammered a couple things there. One is that they're not really trying to typically diagnose you. What they're trying to do is determine if there's a nexus, because you've already, the VA mostly has already conceded that, yeah, of course you're diagnosed with this. You've provided that, right? So we're taking it to the next step here with the C&P to help determine nexus and figure out where you fall on that rating schedule. Okay, because chances are, for most people, unless you're actually listening to us and you're providing all the information needed to your primary doctor and it's getting submitted as evidence, a lot of people don't do that. So the VA goes, okay, great, you're diagnosed with migraines, but are you a 50? Are you a 30? Are you a 10? We need to get this cleared up so we can make a decision. And we need to do it in a repeatable way. And that's where the DBQs come into effect.
Mm-hmm.
But DBQs, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't know what they're looking for, well, then you're not going to put in the right information, right? You might get lucky, you might not, whatever. So I pulled up the schedule of ratings here for migraines. And for those that don't know, and migraines for a rating of, and I like to start from the bottom, right? And then go, okay, do I meet that criteria? Okay, let's go to the next one. So the 0% rating for migraine says with less frequent attacks, period. That's it. So less frequent. Well, less frequent than what? I don't know. So 0% is basically, if you're diagnosed with migraines, you're at least going to get, and it's service, you provided the nexus, right? So if you have a nexus, you have a diagnosis, you should be rated at a minimum 0% for migraines. And then you move up to 10 with characteristics of prostrating attacks averaging 1 and 2 months over the last several months. So it's kind of weird how that wording is. They're not saying over your lifetime or anything like that. They're saying over the last several months. So then again, what's several? Is several 3, 4, 5? Right? So be in the mindset of understanding what they're looking for and look for ways to say yes, but not lie. Yes, but not lie. Okay, be honest with yourself. So with characteristics of prostrating attacks, averaging 1 in 2 months over the last several months. So basically that's over the last several months, you've had 2. So if you had 2 recently in the last half a year, right? Okay, if you say yes, cool. You should at least be at 10%. Then 30%. To have a 30% rating for migraines, it says with characteristic prostrating attacks occurring on average once a month over the last several months. Okay, so then you're at 30%. If you say yes, look, you're the patient, right? If you know that you have, then you have. There you go, 30%. You should be rated 30%. Unless you should be rated 50, let's find out. So here's the 50%, right? With Very frequent, completely prostrating and prolonged attacks. Well, I'll tell you what, that itself, portion of it, is describing a migraine, right? It's not a headache, it's a migraine. I am laid out hugging the side of a toilet because it's cold, right? Trying to, you know, the light hurts my eyes, any noise, I can't lay down. I feel like my heart's beating in my head, right? So it's completely prostrating and prolonged. They last hours, and the residual, if it goes from a major migraine into just a bad headache eventually, and then eventually that will wear off, right? So prolonged attacks, productive of severe economic inadaptability. So here's the key for the 50%. Most people, if you're holding down a job, right? If you have a job and you haven't been fired, you go, well, no, I work, I'm fine, right? Well, have you had to take any time off? Have you had to use up all your sick days? Did you have to take non-paid time off? Did you have to switch your job? Did you have to switch your job and take a lower paid job to do something that was a little more compatible to you with your migraines? If the answer is yes to any of those or any variations of those, then the answer to that is yes. It is productive of a severe economic inadaptability. So it's important, again, to read the schedule of ratings and understand where it's at, because you're going to be asked questions that prompt answers that would give this as the answer. So that way the rating can happen, right? So how often do you have your migraines? Does it have any sort of economic impacts for you? You're going to get those types of questions at your C&P exam. Very important. I tell people, look, print it out, take it with you. Make sure that you don't forget what to say. I mean, this is just the migraine one. The other one is the GERD. The GERD schedule of ratings is, if you miss one word, it'll drop you from a 30 to a 10, because the 10% rating is you have 2 or more symptoms of the symptoms for the 30% evaluation. Mm-hmm. So if you don't name all of the symptoms for the 30%, well, then they're going to make you a 10, even if you have all of the symptoms for the 30%. It's a lot of medical mumbo jumbo, right? It's medical terminology with words that don't even make sense because you don't know what they mean. So you have to Google search it and get the real person definition. So I did that for the 60% rating here, just to read to you. And I'm hammering home on this, Clay, because I want people to understand the importance of the information that's at their fingertips. So for a 60% GERD rating, you have to have symptoms of pain, vomiting, material weight loss, and vomiting of blood, or you have feces that's containing partially digested blood with moderate anemia or other symptom combinations, productive of severe impairment of health. So that is it. Now, what's funny is that if you read the 30%, it talks about persistent recurrent pain in the upper abdomen with difficulty swallowing, heartburn, and regurgitation, right? So what's funny is they're talking about regurgitation, they're talking about heartburn, but a lot of times we're not going to say those things. We might just say heartburn. You're not going to say regurgitation, because that's what I feel like when I have my heartburn. I have heartburn. That's all you say. And so because that's all you say, they drop you down lower and lower and lower. And so print it out, take it with you to your C&P exam, read off of it as they're asking you these things, to make sure that you don't miss a single word. This will help two things. One, it will help to make sure that you're in the best position to obtain the service connection rating that you deserve. And two, in the event that you don't, you know that you provided all of that information and it should be there. And somebody either A, overlooked it or didn't pay the right attention to it, and you can file different ways when you disagree to have that re-looked at. And that's an important piece to make sure that you know that you have that in there. So bottom line is yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said on that, Clay.